As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the tarmac, Emily's heart raced with anticipation. She stood at the gate of a small, dimly lit airport, clutching her boarding pass. The flight to her dream job on the other side of the country was about to begin. She had always been a nervous flyer, but this time, something felt different. The airplane loomed before her, an imposing metal giant that seemed to creak and groan in the gusty wind. She joined the line of passengers waiting to board, a mix of strangers who seemed oblivious to the nagging unease that had settled in Emily's chest. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the dimly lit interior of the plane greeted her with an eerie ambience. Emily settled into her window seat, hoping the familiar sensation of gazing out at the stars above would soothe her nerves. However, the moment the engines roared to life, her unease intensified. The plane seemed to shudder and protest, as if it didn't want to take flight. The cabin lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the passengers' faces. Beside her, a middle-aged man with a weathered face attempted to strike up a conversation, oblivious to Emily's growing anxiety. His voice took on an unsettling quality, wavering between a raspy whisper and an eerie, childlike giggle. Emily tried to focus on her in-flight magazine, but the words blurred before her eyes, and the articles seemed to tell tales of impending doom. The plane taxied to the runway, and Emily clutched her armrests, her knuckles white. She muttered silent prayers, pleading for a safe journey. Just as the plane began its ascent, a deafening thunderclap echoed through the cabin, making Emily's heart skip a beat. The passengers gasped, and the lights overhead flickered menacingly. Terrified whispers filled the air, as everyone on board exchanged nervous glances. Emily's mind raced with thoughts of mechanical failure and impending disaster. She tried to remain calm, but her pulse quickened with every bump and jolt. It felt as if the plane was at the mercy of an invisible force, toying with it like a child with a toy. The flight attendants, their faces a mask of forced cheerfulness, attempted to reassure the passengers. But their words were drowned out by the cacophony of creaking metal and the distant wailing of the wind. Emily's eyes darted around the cabin, and she couldn't help but notice that the other passengers' faces had taken on an eerie, otherworldly pallor. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, Emily's sense of dread deepened. She felt trapped in a nightmarish scenario from which there was no escape. The plane's interior grew colder, and Emily shivered uncontrollably, pulling her coat tightly around her. She watched in terror as frost crept up the windows, obscuring her view of the world outside. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, emitting a distorted voice that sent chills down Emily's spine. It spoke in a language she couldn't understand, a guttural, otherworldly tongue that seemed to come from the very depths of hell. Panic rippled through the cabin as passengers exchanged horrified glances. The man beside Emily clutched her arm, his grip like a vice. His face contorted into a grotesque mask of fear as he muttered unintelligible words. Emily pulled away in terror, but the man's grip only tightened. She could feel the icy fingers of dread inching up her spine as she realized that something was terribly wrong. Desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding around her, Emily fumbled for her seatbelt, her hands trembling violently. The plane continued its erratic ascent, seemingly defying the laws of physics. The intercom crackled once more, and the terrifying voice grew louder, drowning out the passengers' screams. Just as Emily thought she could take no more, the plane jolted violently, throwing her against the seat in front of her. A deafening roar filled the cabin as the airplane's engine sputtered and failed. The lights overhead dimmed to a feeble glow, casting eerie shadows on the passengers' faces. In that moment of darkness and despair, Emily was gripped by an overwhelming sense of dread. She realized that they were no longer in control, that something malevolent had taken hold of the plane. Panic surged through her veins as she saw a shadowy figure standing at the front of the cabin, its features obscured by darkness. The figure spoke in a voice that chilled Emily's very soul, promising horrors beyond imagination. As the plane plummeted toward the earth, passengers screamed in terror, their voices merging into a cacophony of despair. Emily closed her eyes and prayed for a swift end to the nightmare. And then, with a bone-jarring impact, it was over. The world outside the window went black, and Emily knew no more. When she awoke, it was to the sound of sirens and the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. She was lying in a field, her body battered and bruised, but miraculously intact. As the paramedics rushed to her side, Emily couldn't help but wonder if the terrifying flight had been a nightmare or a chilling glimpse into a reality beyond her comprehension. To this day, Emily can't shake the feeling that something otherworldly had taken control of that ill-fated flight, and she shudders at the thought of what might have happened if they had reached their destination. The experience has left her with a deep-seated fear of flying, one that no amount of therapy or rationalization can ever fully dispel. The memory of that terrifying flight across the United States will haunt her for the rest of her days, a chilling reminder that there are forces beyond our understanding that can turn the ordinary into the truly terrifying.